Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is state playoff time. We've made it through 9 weeks of regular season high school football, and now 256 teams left. We're going to cut them in half after this weekend and move forward. And Mike Clark joining us on the other end of the phone. And Mike, it's that time of year. We made it. We survived 9 weeks of regular season, and it's playoff time. I know I'm ready to go. I've got to imagine you're pretty ready to go as well.
Yeah, it's exciting, no doubt. We had a great regular season's worth of weather, which a lot of people were talking about in week 9. So let's keep that going for a little while longer. If we can make it till the finals, of course, the finals will be up in the press box, so that won't be as much of an issue. But we'll be still walking the sidelines for 4 more weeks. So let's keep these warm temperatures and lack of rain around for a while. So.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, lots to look at, lots to dive into. We definitely will give you some thoughts on the state playoff brackets. I know I've had a chance to look at them a little bit after Saturday night. I know, Mike, I'm sure you have as well. But in the meantime, we want to recap our busy week 9, and we certainly had some different things going on. So, Mike, we'll start with you. And looks like you were out at I'm going to guess probably Thursday at a public league game.
Yeah, I had games Thursday and Friday. I actually didn't go out on Saturday this week because I had plenty of other things to work on, as I'm sure you can understand. But yeah, Thursday I was out at Rockney, Curie, and Urban Prep Bronzeville. Curie's a 30-0 winner. A couple of touchdown passes from quarterbacks Dennis Callaway to Gabriel Taylor Jr. of 60 and 45 yards. We've talked about Curie a lot because I've seen them a lot this year. It's their 4th straight win, gets them back into the playoffs for the first time in 5 years at 5-4. And again, just a tremendous job for Jarve Lewis Bay for turning this program around. It's the 3rd public league team he's taken to the playoffs. Sen and Marshall are the other 2. And it's the beginning of something good, I think, on the southwest side. Curie's got all the recipes, all of the ingredients for success. It's a big school, around 3,000 students. Has some athletes in the building. The boys basketball team is always one of the best in the state. And as I mentioned, there's a few of the basketball players on this team. The one thing they're probably going to work on the most in the off season is getting a little bit more numbers out. They're somewhere in the mid-30s right now, and it's tough in 8A to have a roster of 35, 37 kids, something like that. So, but a great turnaround from 0-9 last year.
And they will, by the way, they made the state playoff field, and just to let everybody know, they will take on Glenbard East out in Lombard in round 1. Mike, continue.
Yep. Friday, I was out in Frankfort with thousands of other people for LincolnWay East, Neighborville Central. It was basically the Southwest Valley title game. There were 2 of the 3 division champs. LincolnWay Central was the other one. And LincolnWay East trailed for the first time all year. Neighborville Central had a strip sack in the first minute and then scored very quickly to go up 7-0. And that was it for Naperville Central's offense. East wins 28-7, and it was a close game. It was a 1-score game late into the 3rd quarter, and then East got a couple of touchdowns to pull ahead. But defensive lineman Gage Ladier, 260-pound, 6'2" defensive lineman, had his 2nd pick 6 of the season, 63-yarder. The first one was against Stagg. And Brody Gitch had 12 touchdowns, 72-yard touchdowns, and it was one of the things that came up a little bit. Rob Zavonar, I think, said it pretty well. Basically, every year he said we play 2 running backs. We have a primary guy and a complementary guy, and he said this year they basically have 2 primary guys because Zion just is the other running back. He had got a little bit dinged up earlier in the year, so that gave Brody Gish a few more opportunities. But by neither one of them is going to run 20 or 25 times a game. This time they didn't even run 15 times a game, but that just makes the team better and makes them better because they're really fresh. So, it was a good test for East, and I was really impressed with Naperville Central, especially their speed on defense. And I was also really impressed. Jonas Williams didn't have the numbers that he's had in some games this year. I think he was around 150 yards passing, right around there. But he had a really good game, and it's because of the competition. He kept a lot of plays alive by scrambling out of the pocket. He had a few runs, not a lot, but and I don't know that he had hardly any designed runs, actually. Most of the runs were scrambles, basically, and but even on some of the passes that he completed, he kept the plays alive by just being elusive, and against a really good Naperville Central defense. And these two teams are on the opposite sides of the 8A bracket, and it wouldn't stun me to see a rematch on Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, I've heard that from others too. That pretty similar to what you just recapped. Mentioned Naperville Central, and that defensively is what really stood out to them, and how good they are defensively. And I know they've had some injuries too. I know they're is it Mike Clark, their lead running back at Central? I know I think he came in early and then left again. He's been having some injury issues and certainly hasn't helped Central. But yeah, it's again, it's that LincolnWay East team. It's with Jonas Williams, Mike. It just adds something I don't think East has ever really had.
No, I mean not that I can recall. I mean they've had some
good quarterbacks.
Yep. I would say. Yeah, they've had productive quarterbacks, but they've never had a Power 4 kid playing quarterback for them, and it's just another weapon for them. And obviously they got some really good pieces on the defensive side, Caden O'Rourke, and Gage Lanier. Again, it's like I can't quite get over that. How many defensive linemen have 2 pick sixes in a season?
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. So,
yeah. Yeah, and then another Jacob Alexander on that D line as well, just a junior who's already getting Power 4 offers. So yeah, it's a talented team for sure. We're glad you had a chance to go see them, and I got a feeling I'm going to see them down the playoff road for sure. Friday I wound up at Libertyville, and I don't know. I'm just the North keeps calling me, Mike. I don't know. I just keep deciding to head north during Friday rush hour. But had a great trip up there, Libertyville. Forgot how much fun that whole atmosphere is up at Libertyville. They really do a great job. It's a really nice stadium and really nice surroundings and facilities. And it's been a while since I had been up there for a game, so it was fun to do that. Which I also learned Mike Jones, longtime coach at Libertyville. This is his last year, and they honored him before the game, which is great. And guy I've gotten to know a little bit over the years, and always very helpful from my end, always very accommodating and what have you, which is great. Libertyville winds up with a 35-28 win over Warren. Mike, it actually, to me, it wasn't really that close. Warren got out to a big lead early and just kind of kept cruising, and this is a really good Libertyville team, and I think one of the keys in this game was just the consistency that Libertyville's passing game has, especially downfield. And Quinn Shambo is everything that everyone's talked about so far. Had a chance to obviously watch him up close. Polished, just calm in the pocket, just stands in the pocket like there's nothing coming at him, no pressure, nothing. Takes his time, scans the field, makes great reads, and obviously baseball guy, catcher, really good arm, and just really impressive. And they have a group of receivers that are probably some of the better ones I've seen. Blake Lavisa, just the junior receiver, is a two-way player who's a major impact player for Libertyville. And Miles Baskey up front, just a junior on the O-line. So, again, this is a team with talent, with some young talent. And tell you what, Mike, 6A, they're going to be very, very dangerous here. I know looking at the brackets, and we'll get to that in a little while, but you could see a quarterfinal game between Libertyville and Geneva. And that offensively, very similar personnel, very similar makeup. Definitely got some very comparative vibes watching Libertyville after seeing Geneva a few weeks back. So it's going to be fun. And Mike, this is a team you want to watch out for in 6A. Warren, on the other hand, not the kind of year that they're used to so far. Defensively, obviously they gave up 35 points to a very good Libertyville team. But Mike, you don't want to draw Warren in the first round. You just don't. And they drew Palatine. It's not an easy matchup for Palatine. Warren, still pretty solid defensively. Still a good team. They can definitely run the ball. Aaron Stewart is one of really, I think, 3 running backs that Warren is able to utilize in that offense, and big physical offensive line. Mike, to me, they're that kind of team that if you're going to beat them, you're going to kind of have to do what Libertyville did and get up on them early and make them kind of rally and run the football when they really don't want to. But boy, if they can control clock and control tempo, which Warren did the entire first half, completely controlled the tempo, and it was a 7-7 tie at halftime. Warren can beat some people, Mike. So again, it was one of those games. Like glad I got to see it. Glad I got to see Libertyville up close. Glad I got to see Warren, and 2 teams you definitely want to keep an eye out for now with the playoffs coming up.
Yeah, it's Warren's given up a few more points than usual this year, so that's going to be interesting to see if they can tighten up their defense a little bit going into the playoffs. But yeah, there were a few other big Week 9 games. So I'll just run down them here real quick.
Yep.
Catholic League, ESCC Blue, Loyola 31, Mount Carmel 7. Both Ryan Fitzgerald and Jack Elliott played in this game. That was probably the biggest question people had coming in, but they have basically shut down their run games. I think I saw that there were 2 combined runs between the 2 of them in this game, so they're not really dual threat quarterbacks anymore. Because of the injuries they had that kept each one of them out at least a game this year.
Yep.
Fitzgerald, 238 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Elliott, 260 passing yards, and 1 touchdown, a 67-yarder to Quentin Burrell. So I think, I know Mike O'Brien's story in the Sun-Times, he quoted Jordan Lynch as saying, basically, we need to do better in the red zone. The Caravan moved the ball an awful lot in between the 20s, but obviously just 1 touchdown and probably a bigger margin than a lot of people were expecting out of this game. So, definitely 2 teams to keep an eye out for, obviously, in the postseason. But, Loyola, because of its losses, winds up on the same side of the bracket as LincolnWay East, so we will not have a rematch of last year's title game in 8A, and that's one of the consequences of Loyola having some losses, basically. Excuse me.
Yep.
St. Francis does it again, 39-36 over Nazareth. So St. Francis has wins over Loyola and Nazareth this year, and also has losses to Providence and St. Rita. So, very tough schedule to navigate for the Spartans. This one, Brady Palmer, 222 total yards and 4 touchdowns. On the other side, Logan Malachuk from Naz, 288 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it's interesting because this was Week 9 last year as well. St. Francis won last year as well in Week 9, and that set up Nazareth for a very nervous 24 hours before finding out whether it would get into the playoffs or not. It did. Then they had a rematch in the playoffs. Naz obviously won en route to another 5A state championship. So, this could be, again, the first of 2 times they play this season. Also for Naz, Jake Sistone, 9 catches, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns. Over in the Duquesne, we have a 3-way tie for the championship between St. Charles North, Geneva, and Batavia after St. Charles North beat Geneva, handed the Vikings their first loss 28-21. Ethan Plum, 260 total yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns for the North Stars. North Stars, definitely a team to keep an eye on in 7A. I mean, they're the only team to beat Palatine this year, and they are also the only team to beat Geneva. So definitely keep an eye on St. Charles North. Morgan Park, 42, Simeon 6. Locked up a share of the Public League Red title. Terrence Gurley had 9 carries, 135 yards, TDs of 61 and 40 yards for the Mustangs. And, Morgan Park just basically continues to confirm they're the best program in the Public League. Yep. The other half of that title went to Young, which beat Taft on Friday night. They didn't play each other, so they both wind up undefeated in the Public League Red. And one more from the MSL West, Palatine 30, Barrington 24, so Palatine wins the MSL West outright. Cole Fager, 2 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown for the Pirates. And those are some of the big games that we had this weekend.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And again, exciting week 9, and obviously now we're gearing up and getting ready. But Mike, there were several top performances and some repeat performers on this list as well.
Yeah, Naperville North quarterback Jacob Bell. Who else? We've talked about him pretty much every week. This week it was 342 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and went over Sandberg. Owen Lansu, and somehow I forgot to actually get his stats, but he was well over 300 yards in the Downers North win. Quarterback from Montini, we haven't talked about, I don't think, Izzy Abrams, 21 and 24 passing, 247, 3 touchdowns, and a win. Here's a cool one. Lockport, Chris Miller, who is a defensive starter for them, hasn't played an offensive snap all year. They had some injuries at running back. They put him in. He ran for 290 yards and 5 touchdowns against HF, which knocked HF out of the playoffs, actually. So
yeah, it's
George
Lockport. Yeah, Lockport.
Something out.
Yep. He's had a ton of injuries this year. He's run kids in and out of that lineup on both sides of the ball, and again, just typical. That's George Chart. He do anything he can and utilize that personnel any way he can to win a game. And really, I saw that just terrific story, no doubt.
And one more on the defensive side from DeKalb, linebacker Demarion Ballou, 4 tackles for loss and 2.5 sacks, and a win over Stagg. And that is it for the regular season. We have a lot more to talk about. One piece of downstate news. We don't usually talk about downstate news, but I think in this case it's probably warranted. Derek Leonard, the coach at Rochester, did not coach against Sacred Heart Griffin in Week 9. He was suspended for a game in the wake of an investigation about bullying and hazing at Rochester. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty heated topic in that community. If you want to find out more about it, there's plenty out there. And I'm not going to go over all of it right now, but honestly, some of the things that were found to be true by an independent investigator are a little disturbing and kind of disappointing, honestly. There were no sanctions for any of the players involved. They found that bullying did happen, and again, I'm not going to go into the details, but they said that they could not figure out or determine which players were involved, so no players are sanctioned, and Derek was sanctioned for 1 week. He was unable to coach because basically the school board said that the coaches were aware of these meetings. They happened every Thursday, and basically the board said that the coaches should have known a little bit more about what was going on. So, again, just, we hear about hazing allegations every once in a while. It's always disappointing because the vast majority of teams don't engage in this stuff. And, when you see a program in the news because of it, it's unfortunate. I don't think it has any place in high school football, and I'm kind of disappointed, to be honest with you.
I am too. And, I mean, in this day and age, haven't we gotten past this? Obviously we haven't. I mean, what are people doing? Really? Come on. It just, enough. Enough of this, Mike. Enough of the bullying, enough of the hazing and all this other stuff. It's hard enough to be a kid these days. It's hard enough to get kids involved in sports, and then you have to deal with this stuff. I'm with you. I don't even know what else to say, honestly. You want to find details, you can go online and find it. But it's incredibly disappointing. A program that obviously has had tremendous success, and Derek Leonard's had huge amount to do with that. But no, there's no that. This is just disappointing all across the board. So it's about all I have to say on it. Just stop it. Enough.
Yeah,
Enough.
Exactly. And let's turn then to the playoffs. A lot to dig into here. I've got a few things to talk about. I'm sure you've got a few things to throw out there as well. And probably one of the biggest takeaways is there's only one 4-5 team in the field. That's Kenwood. And the interesting thing, of course, is that we thought at the beginning of the year that we might have a lot of 4-5 teams. We thought with the public league tightening up the playoff eligibility for the white sections, that we would not have as many public league teams, which would open up some more spots for non-public league teams, including possibly some 4-5 teams. But you never really can tell how the season's going to play out, and it turns out there were a lot of 5-4 teams, and the bar was very high to get in as a 4-5 team. We had one, which goes back, I believe, 2 years ago we had one,
right?
And then last year we had 6. So it's hard to say. That's congrats to Kenwood for getting in, and I know there were a lot of disappointed 4-5 teams out there. But that's where we're at this year. Yeah,
it's again, and our guy Susie does an amazing job with his projections, and you look at what his final projection was versus what actually came out, and pretty damn close, Mike, in almost every class. So again, he does a terrific job with that, and it's a fun read. But it is a projection, and things can look one way one week, and all of a sudden you get a couple of upsets here and there, and it can change. So I think everyone I think the diehards certainly understand how that can change. I think some of the casual fan gets a little confused by it from time to time. But, it's just that kind of a year. I mean, we talked about it very early on, and as the season kind of went on, it was, kind of a sprint to the middle, if that makes any sense. I mean,
that's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
And it just, you saw the elites and the blue bloods with 2 losses and 3 losses, and there were quite a few of them. And it's just that kind of a year. What that does, Mike, I think it's going to make for some tremendous early playoff games. You're going to see some of those bigger names. Mount Carmel's on the road in the first round. How often does that happen? Not very at all.
No.
So, Harlem, McChesney Park, Harlem is going to have an even larger crowd than usual because look at what's coming to town. So you're gonna draw the entire greater Rockford area is going to come out and root against Mount Carmel. It's going to happen. It's going to be some really interesting playoff atmospheres and teams going on the road and something they're probably not familiar with. And I think that just adds to the intrigue. It adds to why it's going to be even a more interesting playoff than maybe compared to some other years. Is it really good football?
Yeah,
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is that besides having just a 1-4-5 team, I think Steve said that. Sorry, I get.
Oh, it's that fall. It's that fall time of year. Yep.
The coughing
Yep.
spree, but yeah, fewer undefeated teams than usual.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's the other interesting aspect, and like you said, that speaks to more parity overall. So the teams that got through as undefeated, it's going to be interesting to see how things go for them in the playoffs, because they're really kind of a really difficult path to get through to be undefeated. Yep. Obviously, but,
no question.
I have a few first round games to keep an eye on in the bigger classes. Warren, we just mentioned, at Palatine in 8A, also in 8A, Maine South at Naperville North. Maine South we haven't talked a lot about. Since the beginning of the season, they had some issues. They had some injuries. They changed quarterbacks, went on and won the CSL South as usual. But that'll be an interesting one. A couple of interesting ones in 7A, Brother Rice at Fenwick, and Percy at Prospect, which is a rematch of what was essentially the MSL East title game. So those are, four really, really high level games. All of those teams have been ranked in the top 25 at one point this season. Yep. Some of them are still ranked. And so those are some that kind of jumped out at me.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm still digging through it. I'm in the middle of starting to put together my previews this week, which I kind of roll out 3 different sections for 4 classes every day. So I'm in the middle of flying through that, and I basically have gone through 8A, 7A, 6A. I think, and again, whenever this team comes to town, it's intriguing. 8A, Edwardsville taking on York. I think that one is a really, really interesting game. It could be a really well-played game, too. They're both kind of similar offensively in what they do, and a lot of high-profile talent on there. Joseph Reef from York, obviously, big-time name, and going up against IHSA Epinesa, who's a 5-star kid committed to Iowa. So, again, you've got some big names, and that'll be a really interesting showdown for sure in 8A. And there's some great matchups. The games I like, too, Mike, are like West Aurora hosting Huntley. West Aurora 9-0. Okay, wow, they play in the in the Upstate 8, and not a great conference, but West Aurora has put it on people this year, and they've got a really good offense. And then Huntley coming out of the Fox Valley, they're battle tested. I always find kind of intriguing games of those matchups as well. Is West Aurora maybe better than we're giving them credit, or maybe they're not that good? That's why I love the first round, because we get a lot of answers in games like that.
Yeah, for sure. There will be, some of the upsets, quote unquote, will not be upsets because of
right.
Because of our pairing system, which is weighted heavily toward wins and not toward strength of schedule. We know, Whitney Young is the number 1 seed in 7A, and they had a great season. They're having a great season, but as Mike O'Brien said, even the Dolphins know they're not the best team in 7A.
Right.
They're going to try to make a little bit of noise in the playoffs, but it's kind of where we're at. And to have Rice and Fenwick playing the first round,
yeah.
when you can make a pretty good case that they're those are, I would say, quarterfinal teams at least, depending on how things would break. So, it's something that, well, let's do a rant. We haven't done one for a while.
You know what? I've got something I want to add, and I felt the rant coming on, so I wanted to get this in.
Okay.
Obviously Saturday night I was downtown Chicago at WCIU doing the TV broadcast, and Matt Troha from the IHSA was there all day, and we were going through stuff, and I saw the brackets come up, and I saw Brother Rice and Fenwick, and I go, and then 7A I saw Prospect Hersey round 1. I'm like, the one thing that kind of drives me nuts is when conference opponents have to play each other in the first round. And Matt told me, and I didn't even realize this, he told me, he said, it's interesting because he's like, I totally understand that. It's never been brought up to them. It's never been brought by the football advisory committee. If it has, Matt said he certainly doesn't remember if it was. And I don't know, Mike, I would think, wouldn't that be maybe something for them to really consider? I mean, again, if I'm a team that gets juggled around because of that, I guess I wouldn't be real happy about it. But isn't there a way we can avoid that in the first round? I would think there would be.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not as bad as it used to be because, we used to have the quads.
And when it's one, right, and when it's 1 through 32, at least you understand there's like a reasoning for it happening. So I get that.
Right. Yeah, I don't. I mean, it is what it is. It's I don't know that you can entirely get away from it,
right,
unless you make that also a criteria to avoid matching that. You know what I mean? Matching conference opponents early on. But the Rant is something that's familiar probably to people who have been listening to this for a few years now. It's like I still think that we should use computer rankings to rank the teams. I mean, there are a lot of different ideas out there. Michael O'Brien thinks that everyone should get in, and we talked about. I'm not really on board with that necessarily.
No,
I would be on board with adding 50% more teams to going from 256 to 384, because that would basically bring in, as we mentioned, that would bring in buys, and it would make the first round games, basically you'd have like 5 and 4 versus 3 and 6 or something like that, or
right.
6 and 3 versus 4 and 5. So those first round games would theoretically be more competitive, and then the next round, when the bye teams play, the 9-0 teams would play a 6 and 3 team or a 7 and 2 team. So that should theoretically be more competitive as well. Right now, obviously, without any buys, we got 5 and 4s that kind of are sneaking in, playing, pretty good 9-0s, so on and so forth. If everybody got in, then we'd be having winless teams playing,
right.
9-0 teams, which I don't think is good either. But again, it's like, the technology is there to do computer rankings. As I mentioned before, Jeff Sagarin, who has been doing the USA Today rankings in various sports for years, does them in Indiana for high school football and basketball. I believe Michigan uses computer rankings as well. There may be other states out there too, but and I can say this, but if there's not a will or a desire on the part of schools to do this, then I could just keep ranting and it won't make any difference.
Right.
But and just to your point just now, basically that apparently schools haven't brought up the avoiding conference matchups early. So I guess sometimes what we think is important is not sometimes what coaches and administrators think is important. But at the same time, people are definitely going to complain about stuff like that. So my response to that would be, well, if you don't like the current system, then come up with a better system, basically.
Agreed.
And then also not only do that, but get the votes to put it in. And no, districts is not a better system.
No.
Never will be.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Let's keep conferences around, and let's figure out a way to make it a little bit better. But and again, the more that I've thought about it this year, I think this year has kind of been a turning point in my approach to this. I do believe that we should expand the playoffs to 384, and I hope somebody comes up with a good proposal for that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I tend to lean towards it's not even I wouldn't even say it's a rant. It's more of accepting the fact that we're going to increase. It's going to increase. To me, it's just a matter of time. before they, as you mentioned, come up with a plan and can get it done and put through. And, we'll live with it. We lived with it going to 8 classes and from 5 to 8. And yeah, we ranted and raved, didn't want to see that, but we did, and it worked out fine. And we have more we have more state titles and more football. So I'm all about more football. So,
Absolutely.
The other thing that I don't know. Well, there's a whole bunch of other things, but there's a couple of things that always, yeah. There's always a couple of things that kind of stick out, and the thing that I don't get, and we continue to battle this every year, is the schools that just want to abandon Friday night games starting in the opening round. I know it's kind of a per school decision. You know what I mean, though? It's. It becomes, and again, if I ever wasn't lazy and decided to write a book, talk about some of the infighting and battles that go on with schools trying to determine a day and a time for a high school football game. It might blow your mind if you heard some of the things that go on behind the scenes. If you play Friday night all year, and I understand weather, weather can be a factor, but I'm literally knocking on wood as I say this. Weather has not really been a factor yet this year, and looking at the advanced forecast, it looks like we should be okay coming up this week. So again, knocking on wood for that. I don't get it. And in like weird times. Now, there's been a case on occasion where schools will have multiple things going on that day. Totally understand. You're trying to manage a bunch of stuff and keep everybody happy. But in more cases than not, Mike, it's I don't get like a Saturday at 3:00 or a Saturday at 4:00 kickoff. I mean, I guess that works for both schools, and we're fine with it. But I don't know, that and the whole home field thing still confuses a casual fan, and I don't blame them because it should.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as far as the Friday versus Saturday issue, basically coaches know that they will have 1 week of the playoffs to have an extra day of preparation.
Right.
And some of them like to have it right up front, so they go to Saturday right away. Some of them like to keep that in their pocket if they think that they're going to have a really tough second round game or a really tough quarterfinal game. Then they'll play week 1 of the playoffs on Friday. They might even play week 2 of the playoffs on Friday. The first week there's a decent number of Friday games. In week 2 there won't be very many. In the quarterfinals,
basically
there might be
none.
1.
Yeah.
I can see that argument. In terms of the game times, I kind of like different game times because the goal. I always I would love to be able to see 2 games on Saturday, and that's partly dependent on location and partly dependent on time. So I don't know if I will or not. I haven't looked closely enough at the brackets to figure out if I will be able to see 2 games on Saturday or not. But,
yeah, I'm doing the same. I'm trying to figure it out too.
The midday, I'm okay with like the midday kickoffs on Saturday because partly, you do get into some weather issues, cold weather after sundown. So if you want to start at 3:00 or
I get it.
Even 4:00, most of the game's going to be done by the time the sun goes down. And the other thing too is, if you do have a long trip, Edwardsville is coming up here. I don't remember off the top of my head what time they're playing, but if you do have a long
they're playing
trip,
Friday.
They are playing Friday. Okay,
yeah,
I know there's a few others.
Yeah, there's not a school. There's not a school more better at handling that than Edwardsville. I mean, they just are. They're actually playing Friday 6:00.
I mean, I guess. Okay. Yeah, but I mean, I would kind of say that I think that administrators are kind of trying to give fans a little bit of a break, so you don't have to get up at like 6 in the morning.
No, I agree.
I get it.
Totally get it.
And you won't be home at midnight. So I mean, if you have that, 2, 3, 4 o'clock start, there's not a lot of them. I think they're mostly, 7:00 Friday, 1:00, 7:00 on Saturday. So, but you're right. I mean, again, it's like, I don't know. I'm just glad to have a bunch of options because, very, very soon we will not have very many options at all, and everything's going to be on Saturday, and almost all of it's going to be on Saturday afternoon. So,
yeah. Thoughts on the home field deal? I mean, 25 years ago, I understand it because there was still a majority of grass fields, but isn't that kind of gone away now for the most part?
So I'm assuming you're talking about that the top seeds don't always get the home field once we get past the first round. Yeah. I would agree with you. I mean, I think that there ought to be some kind of advantage to being good in the regular season. And one of those advantages is getting a higher seed. So, and people certainly, you're right. The average fan does not understand why a lower seed with a worse record is getting a home game against, LincolnWay East could go on the road, at some point, and they'll say, why is this happening? But that's, for those of our listeners who don't know the reason for that. So basically the best seed gets the home field in the first round. In the second round, whoever has not hosted gets the home field. If they both hosted or if they were both on the road, then the seeds come into play. And so on through the playoffs until we get to Illinois State, obviously. But, again, I don't hear a lot of people complaining about this. I hear fans complaining about it. I don't hear a lot of coaches complaining about it. So I don't know. Maybe it's a bigger deal to us than it is to them. I'm not sure.
Could be. Very much so. All right, that's all the ranting I have, basically.
Okay. Well, it's a little bit more than usual for the two of us.
Yeah.
But, just another thing to throw out there. Toughest bracket for the top contender. I think we can narrow in on 8A.
Yeah.
And Loyola and Marist could see each other in the second round.
Yep.
And that winner could play Naperville North in the quarterfinals and LincolnWay East in the semifinals. So that is a tough road right there.
I got a good one for you.
I
got a good one for you. Ready?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
7A, the mid-upper bracket with 4-seed Batavia. So Downers North is a 5-seed. They host Wheaton Warrenville South. The winner of that plays the winner of Brother Rice and Fenwick. And then quarterfinal, you're potentially looking at, Batavia, maybe LincolnWay West. That is not an easy first couple of rounds.
No, it's not. I guess, the funny thing is, too, because of the way that the pairings are put together, you can look at some other teams that have, I don't know that I want to say easy, but easier route to the quarters or the ties. So, it's funny how all that plays out. And maybe we'll be wrong, too. Maybe there'll be some teams that step up and do a little bit better than we think they will. But
and if we're wrong, Mike, I guarantee you we are going to hear about it, probably immediately after the game ends, is my experience.
Yeah, well, no doubt. I mean, I'm not picking anything in this round, so I'm insulating myself a little bit from that. But
I pick every game.
You picked every game?
Okay. Every game, every round.
You're a braver man than I am.
Or dumber, depending on your point of view.
Congrats on that. But, Doug, I think that's about all. Did we get any questions this week? I don't know
we did. We did, and I think everyone's just geared up for playoffs, and I guarantee you we'll be getting them starting next week. So, again, you can check my Twitter, check Mike's Twitter. We'll put it out usually early in the day before we record, and if you have any questions about high school football, let us know. We're more than happy to help and more than happy to answer your question. That's about it. I'm still trying to figure out exactly where I'm going to go. Haven't narrowed it down yet, but I probably will by the end of today, Monday. Mike, you figure anything out yet, or are you still waiting?
Yeah, I just saw all the dates and times right before we started, actually, so I haven't had enough time to kind of dig into it yet. But my goal would be to see 3 games, one on Friday and 2 on Saturday. Yep. So we'll see if that plays out. I'll know probably by tomorrow for sure. So.
Yep, me too. Always the goal, as much football as I can fit in this time here. So, all right, that'll do it. So appreciate everybody listening and for your feedback and your support all season. We will be here next time. And remember, we're recording this on Mondays now. So generally you can look for the podcast episode out on Monday afternoon, Monday evening. So for Mike Clark, I'm EDGYTIM. Thanks everybody for listening to the Between the Lines podcast.